Hi, my name is Kudakoshi Manyao, and welcome to my presentation on self-help groups as a form of therapy. English is my second language, so just a disclaimer, bear with me. For this project, I'm going to be focusing on self-help groups as a form of therapy, and I'll start by defining what self-help groups are. According to our textbook, self-help groups are made of people who share a common struggle, condition, or situation. The key purpose of this type of groups is for people to offer each other's emotional support, social support, and any other kind of support without needing a professional therapist to be present. One of the main reasons this type of therapies exist is because not everyone can afford therapy and not everyone feels comfortable talking to a therapist who hasn't gone through the same experience as them. Self-help groups create a space where people can connect over shared experiences and feel understood. So when we talk about therapy in this form, we're talking about a community-based kind of healing where people help each other, often at no cost, and they share based on what they understand. The psychological roots of this type of therapy and some key figures are Carl Rogers and Bill Wilson. The psychological roots are humanistic perspective and cognitive perspective. The humanistic side is most not notable with the psychologist Carl Rogers, who emphasized personal growth through empathy and active listening. His person-centered therapy believed in an unconditional positive regard, basically showing people that they're accepted at any moment without judgment and this reflected this is reflected in self-help groups where people feel free to speak without fear of being criticized. From the cognitive perspective, which is a really big part of the cognitive behavioral therapy, um, members in self-help groups often challenge each other's negative thinking patterns, not as professionals, but by sharing real experiences and offering alternative viewpoints. That's powerful because it helps people to learn and think differently, which is a key emotional part of their healing. So building on that, we have two two fathers here. We have Bill Wilson, who is the founder of arguably the most known social help group, Alcoholic Anonymous, and he's a key figure in the self-help movement. His work shows how powerful peer support can be in recovery. But modern psychology has added layers to this, like Carl Rogers and the humanistic school, which shaped groups' interactions by encouraging emotional honesty, reflection, and empathy. That's why self-help groups emphasize on storytelling and active listening. Brief history of self-help groups. They started being popular in the early 1900s with Alcoholics Anonymous by Bill Wilson, as I've already explained, and his partner, Dr. Bob Smith in Akron, Ohio. Their approach combined some spiritual principles with peer support, introducing the now famous 12-step program, which is very synonymous with this type of therapy. This model emphasized mutual aid and personal accountability in individuals, and it laid the groundwork for future self-help groups. In the 1950s and 1960s, the success of Alcohol Anonymous had already sprouted the formation of other groups like Narcotics Anonymous and Al-Anon, and these groups also provided support for families and friends of alcoholics or drug addicts, because this also affects their loved ones too. In the 1990s, we saw a huge shift from sort of this public spaces to more online spaces, because advancements in technologies that allowed for virtual meetings, forums, and chat rooms to start forming up, making support accessible for individuals in remote areas or those who, if, were seeking anonymity, because they value their privacy. This digital expansion has been very crucial in reaching diverse populations and adapting to modern needs. And today, self-help groups continue to thrive both in person and online. We have many types of self-help groups, and they don't just focus on addiction like Alcoholics Anonymous. They also support groups for mental health conditions like depression and bipolar disorder. We also have grief-related loss, grief-related problems like loss, and I think one of the groups for this is it's called Grief Share, and we have self-help groups that focus on chronic illness like MS and cancer and chronic pain. The idea is that people join based on their shared experience and their shared identity, which is what helps members to feel understood and less alone. A very important aspect of this is the peer support. So I'm going to look at the structure and the methods of self-help groups. And these self-help groups usually follow a simple structure where they can be open and anyone can join at any time, or they can be closed. Remembers commit to attending regularly. One of the most well-known methods and structures of self-help groups is the 12-step program, which was originally developed, like I've mentioned before, by Bill Wilson in the Alcoholics Anonymous group. This method focuses on personal reflection, where people share responsibility and support their peers as they move through recovery. One of the biggest strengths of self-help groups is the peer support, through which ties shared experiences ties together everyone who's there and they heal together. And a very important thing we've learned in class that can be used to explain how people help each other is observational learning, or which is what a psychologist called Bandura coded, where you learn by watching. And his Bobodo experiment, a kid imitated the behavior by watching an adult model and replicated that behavior. The same idea plays out in self-help groups where members learn healthy coping strategies and emotional responses by observing others who have been through the same challenges. Another key point is that groups that are peer-led are not run by therapists. Leaders are usually members themselves, which helps create a kind of sense of community and accountability. Culturally, this approach also allows flexibility, and group members can reflect their values and communicate, reflecting their values together with the leaders because they're all one. So, as I've just been mentioning, the facilitator role uh, in psychology, in self-help groups is one unlicensed, where there's no licensed therapist, and facilitators in these groups are like peers. They are not trained professionals, and they don't diagnose anyone. They don't l come from any form of experience. What makes them powerful is not their credentials, but they are credible. They have lived through the same things as the members who are facing these problems, and this helps the members build trust, um, I've started to trust the facilitators more, and it just creates a sense of relatability, which is something a psychologist cannot offer sometimes. And this peer-led structure supports a unique kind of accountability and community because no one is above anyone else. Everyone feels equally responsible for maintaining a respectful and safe environment. This flat structure helps people open up, and especially when they know that the person listening has walked in their shoes. According to chapter 15, there's one key difference between self-help groups and therapist-led sessions. In groups like this, the strength lies in shared experience, not clinical expertise. And there's the very huge factor of empathy. So, like I've mentioned already, the not professionals, the community is led by peers, and there's a huge sense of accountability. When I say accountability, I mean people will hold you accountable for what you have done, and you can also hold other people accountable, but it's not in a mocking way. It's in a way where people are building each other up. There's some psychological mechanisms in this. Like I've mentioned before, we have Bandura's theory of social learning, like with the Bobo experiment, where little kids replicated the aggressive nature that they saw in adult models that they replicated. And the point is, people don't just learn from what they're doing, they learn from watching. The same mechanism happens in social help groups where members share how they've handled relapse or difficult emotion, and others in the groups can mentally model that behavior and apply it to their own lives. Other other psychological tools are cognitive restructuring, which is a technique in cognitive behavioral therapy where people are taught to be people are taught to challenge irrational and self-defeating thoughts like I'm hopeless, I'll never change, and replace them with more rational, positive ones. In self-help groups, this process happens informally. Members listen and reflect and often challenge each other's thinking in supportive ways that echo CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And even though there's no professional therapist in the room, this is very effective. So whether it's learning and by observation or actively challenging negative thought patterns, this psychological mechanism explains how self-help groups promote actual behavior change. So, some cultural perceptions of self-help groups come with like a huge mental stigma, and which makes it difficult for people to still seek help. Sometimes self-help groups offer which is weird because self-help groups uh offer a low pressure alternative where people can find support without feeling judged. But stigma isn't the only barrier. Sometimes we have language barriers, we have accessibility, uh, which is also a matter. And if a group doesn't offer translation or culturally relevant content, people may feel left out. This is where online spaces make a very huge difference. Um, We have global reach in online groups where people can connect across borders, often with more privacy and less fear of judgment. And this is common in countries like Germany, where there's less of where there's less of need for people to meet in public, and they usually just meet online when they have problems. So thanks to digital accessibility, people know now can join support groups from their homes or libraries everywhere in the internet. Platforms like Zoom, which allow people to interact in real time, whether they're in rural or undeserved regions where professional therapy might be hard to find. It breaks down barriers like transportation costs or stigma, especially for people who feel anxious about showing up in person. We also have multilingual online forums, which allow for people to have different cultural backgrounds and connect. We have groups like the ones on Reddit. Here, I have, pardon my language, r/nofap, which is a forum on Reddit that helps people dealing with compulsive sexual behaviors like lust or masturbation, like who are trying to face those problems and stop. These are not the only groups. We also have Alcoholics Anonymous on the same platform, and people are able to be brought together and share accountability. And this places offer a safe space for people to talk about addiction, recovery, mental health without needing to reveal their personal identities, which is really great. So people use aliases and can lurk or participate however they feel comfortable. So while not uh, a formal thing, this also counts as social help groups because there is still a human element to them. So this digital expansion ties into our core themes of therapeutic access and cultural relevances. And This lets people access support that's more personalized and immediate. And while it's not therapy in the traditional case, like I've explained, uh, the therapeutic effects of belonging, expression, and peer support are very real. Global self-help groups are making mental health support more equitable and more possible for some people. And no matter where someone lives or what language they speak, like me, um, they can understand this. So some beneficial disorders in populations that we have first off is addiction, which is a very huge one, especially alcohol and drug dependency. Groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, and Narcotics Anonymous are the most common examples. These programs focus on community support, accountability, and relapse prevention. We have grief and loss, and which is another idea where we can have self-help groups, and they can also be very life-changing. We have programs like Grief Share, which offer structured sessions where individuals who are coping with bereavement can can find people who are also going through them and find mutual support and healing ends. And we also have groups for even things like depression and anxiety, which have people which also have groups where peers can offer emotional support, encouragement to challenge negative thinking and help each other. Some some huge differences can be seen across ages, and there's some different ways that uh people in different ages can be approached. For teenagers, a key factor is this thing called engagement style, where teens are most likely to respond to informal or digital spaces, like I have mentioned before, Reddit threads, Discord servers, or private group chats. This makes them feel more comfortable, and they they might not feel as comfortable sharing like a traditional person, but they can be more open when there's anonymity in check. And peer validation is very huge at that age. So seeing others at their age going through the same struggles can make them feel very normal, and it's very powerful. On the other hand, adults sometimes prefer more structured environments like scheduled Zoom calls or in-person meetings with clear goals. They tend to approach self-help with a mindset of personal responsibility and are more consistent in their participation. Before wrapping up, here are a few key takeaways from this presentation before heading to the next peer-reviewed study on social help groups as a form of therapy. First, social help groups are grounded in real psychological theories. For example, Carl Rogers' humanistic emphasis on empathy and unconditional positive regard, to Bandura's observational learning, and to even cognitive restructuring. Um, Social help groups are very affordable and accessible, and they're very cost effective for people who just want help that can come in any shape and form from many people who are facing the same problems with them. Then, social help groups have become very globally accessible, which has led to their growing support and has become a cultural adaptation because platforms like Zoom and Reddit allow people from different languages and cultures and backgrounds to connect anonymously and receive emotional support. There's a lot of empowerment that comes from the social help groups, and they allow people from a variety of needs like addiction and grief and depression to get the help that they need through peer-led structure, which makes members feel more connected and accountable and understood. So for my peer review, the piece of research, I'm going to be looking at a paper by Verdus and Christus in 2006. Not sure if I said it right. The research is focused on people who had already gone through rehab and wanted to see if attending groups like AA or NA afterward would make a measurable difference in their recovery outcomes. To test their hypothesis, The researchers followed 114 patients recovering from alcohol and drug dependency. The patients were between the ages of 25 and 55 and included both men and women. They collected data using a combination of questionnaires, interviews, and logistic regression analysis. The patients were tracked for 2 years after rehab, giving the study a very strong longitudinal value. And even though this paper did not have a control group, this gives it uh, a bit of credibility. Some of the key findings in this paper were that after the after 2 years of tracking these individuals, 81% of the people who regularly attended self-help groups remained abstinent from drugs or alcohol. In contrast, 26% of the people who did not go to these self-help groups stayed sober. So this difference was very statistically significant, and the p-value they got for this was less than 0.05. The actual p-value is 0.01, but because it was less than 0.05, it was very significant. But uh, a huge factor to remember in papers like this is correlation is not causation, as we learned in chapter one, because there was no control group in this paper. So th there might not be a correlation, but the data is very striking. The researchers themselves also stated as one of their limitations, besides the paper having no control group, that there was a potential for self-selection bias, which is uh, a case where the individuals who took this test might have who took these chances to join self-help groups were already motivated to recover, unlike the other people who weren't motivated. So there was a self-selection bias. But other than that, there is still compelling evidence that regular participation in peer-led recovery groups like AA or NA can significantly boost chances of people staying sober. The findings also suggest that addressing mental health challenges can lower group participation, which can lower group participation, is also important if we want these programs to benefit more people. So they're considering that people might have to look for reasons why people would want to attend. So, a quick summary of the peer-reviewed study is they wanted to find out if self-help group programs actually did help people who go through drug addiction or alcohol addiction. And for their methods, they use standard protocols such as questionnaires and interviews. And for their findings, they found out that a higher number of people who went for social help groups that were combating addiction actually stayed abstinent in comparison to people who did not take part in this type of groups. For my references, I have a APA citation for this paper. I used the textbook for most of this material, and to further understand the information in this project, I also used Khan Academy a couple of times and Crash Course Psychology. Thank you.